Renee Rosenberg, MA, is a positivity pro, licensed mental health counselor, courageous talent development coach, certified career counselor, speaker, emotional intelligence coach, works with organizations and individuals to foster engagement, productivity, intergenerational communication, well-being, and career success and happiness. A 20-year member of the National Speakers Association, Renee presents virtually and in person, nationally and internationally. Renee has been interviewed in the media, in print and online, ABC, Eyewitness News, MSNBC, Italian television, and Forbes.com, to name a few. Her book, Achieving the Good Life After 50, is about reflecting, refocusing, and reinventing work and life after 50 plus. Earlier in her career, Renee lived and worked in Japan, assisted fashion designer Kansai Yamamoto, and met David Bowie. So without further ado, I turn it over to you, Renee.
Wow, thank you so much, Jeffrey, for that introduction. And thank you for the opportunity to be here tonight. Just a few days before Thanksgiving, to be able to talk about a topic that I find is extremely important and to offer some suggestions on how to stay positive and how to get rid of that whole ageism syndrome that's been bogging so many people down. So I'm so glad to be here. So I'm going to share my screen now and start my presentation. And I'll be asking questions, so please use the chat. Please keep it open. Please chat if you like. I do check it regularly to see what you're saying. And if you have a burning question for me, then please raise your hand and let me know. But I might just open up the questions at the end instead then. Okay, so I'm going to share my screen and here we go. Today I'll be talking about older workers rock. And I'm going to be talking about ageism and ageist philosophies and feelings and thoughts that people have. And I'm not going to be talking only about work. I'm going to be talking also about our life and how we can live a happier life as we start to move up in the years. Okay, so I have a question. And my question is, who is the older worker? Is it 1? Is it 2? Or is it 3? Which one do you think is the older worker? And why don't you put it into the chat? And let's see what we're thinking. Anyone have any thoughts or ideas? Okay, Lori. Yeah, Lori says all 3. Okay, Lori, have you seen this presentation before? Anyone else have any ideas? Well, since you got it, we're just going to go with you. And yes, all 3 of them are the older worker. And this is really a trick question because we really have so many older workers of different ages in the workforce now that it's very hard to say that someone is an older worker when someone isn't. So this lady right here, when she was working, she was in her 80s and still working. This gentleman turned 40. He's a young looking 40, but he considered himself also an older worker, which was pretty shocking to me that people actually, when they're 40, think that they're getting old. And this gentleman was 65. So all of them were in the workforce at the same time. And actually, what we have now in the workforce are 2 more generations. So we have 5 generations that are now within our workforce. So the workforce is becoming pretty crowded with the people of all different ages, but we certainly are seeing a lot of workforce older workers. Next. And why? Because people are healthier, people are living longer, and people are working longer. Many people want to keep working into their 70s and into their 80s. And so we have people in their 20s and people in their 80s who are still working. And we're seeing a lot of older workers staying in the workforce. Next. The fact is that there's a talent shortage, which is very good for the older worker, and that also the older worker is considered a valued commodity now, that there are older workers with more experience, more knowledge, more training, that employers are looking for them. So if you are someone who has been in the workforce for a long time and think that probably you're going to be pushed out, there are people that really still really want you because you are still a valued commodity. Next. But you have problems. Older workers always have problems. And let's look at what some of the problems are. And they're not really just older workers. Everybody has these problems, but they're specific to the clients that I've worked with who are in their 60s, 70s, and 80s. And the first problem is negative beliefs. People that I've worked with have all of these concerns that have come up that I've put into this chart. They focused on failure. They're fearful and they're avoiding. They're resistant. They're worried. People worry all the time. And sometimes we worry and we don't even have to worry because what we worry about doesn't even happen. So many of my clients have been angry. They express a lot of anger toward the company, toward the government, toward the culture, toward our whole society. And all of this is so negative that it kind of draws you and pulls you down. And what happens is it creates more stress. You get more exhausted and you get ultimately more depressed. So negative beliefs are really a big problem when it comes to looking for a job, staying focused, and staying positive in your life. Next. That's the first one, negative beliefs. The next one is self-stereotyping. That's what we call internalized ageism. And so many people look at themselves and say something that they shouldn't be saying. And I'm going to ask some of you, do you think that you have been using self-stereotyping or internalized ageism? Have you been saying to yourself, I'm getting so old? Or, oh my gosh, I don't hear as well as I used to. Well, all of that is putting us down and making us feel older. In 1968, Robert Butler, who was the director of the American Institute of Aging, decided that we needed to have a term that really encompassed all of these negative feelings that people had about aging. And he came up with ageism. So ageism is not such a really old term, but it's a term that has not gone away. And it's still with us. You know, when sexism and racism and all of those are not PC anymore, which they shouldn't be, but ageism is still accepted. And this is something that we really need to be looking at and really need to be telling people that we need to not do this anymore. And what his definition of ageism was systematic discrimination against older people. Sounds pretty bad, doesn't it? That's what ageism is. And that's what we need to be fighting. Systematic discrimination against older people. So this is another problem when we self-stereotype. Well, first I want to point out, this is good, that George Burns said it all. And I think this is a wonderful quote. If we just look at George Burns' quotes, we can really get a good sense of what's happening and look at it with humor. And he wrote that when I was young, I was called a rugged individualist. When I was in my 50s, I was considered eccentric. Here I am doing the same things I did then, and now I'm labeled senile. And this is what ageism is really about. We label people on their age, on their chronological number, rather than how they perform and who they are. And this is something that our whole society is really guilty of. And we're pretty guilty of it too, actually. Another problem is that when we have negative attitudes and we self-stereotype, this can affect our health, it can affect our resilience, and most importantly, can affect our life expectancy, our longevity. So all of this negativity has a real effect on our body and on our health. Next. Oh, and this is another big one. Another big, big problem is the media. The media wants to sell papers. They want to sell their articles. They want us to read what they're writing, and they want to make money. And so they write what they think is going to be shocking, what people really they think needs to hear. Now, I'm going to tell you about an article that I read in the New York Times. If you go next, please, you'll see this mention to this article. The title was, "For the Unemployed Over 50, Fears of Never Working Again." Can you imagine? This was on the front page of the New York Times, September 19th in 2010. This was a number of years ago, but it was still a pretty horrible article. And I actually wrote a letter to the editor saying that they shouldn't write articles like this. Now, what was wrong with this article was not that people unemployed fear never working again, but they gave an example of a woman. Her name was Pat, and Pat lived in Bainbridge Island up in Puget Sound, which is a beautiful area. And she was complaining about where she lived, which I couldn't understand because it was really a lovely place to be. But she was looking for work. They were giving a whole background of her work history. She had worked for 20 years at Boeing as an internal auditor. And for the last 4 years, Pat was looking for a new job. She has been let go. And for 4 years, she was unemployed. And she couldn't find any work. Well, the reason she couldn't find any work was that Pat was getting up every morning, getting dressed, and getting onto the internet and looking at the job boards for 4 years. She never spent any time updating her skills. She never did any research. And more important, she never looked for a job the right way. And so anyone who uses the job boards for 4 years will not get a job. And that's not what they said, though. They just blamed it on the fact that she was old. She was 57 at the time. And so we read these articles and we become very frightened that this is the truth. It's not the truth. So we have to not look at the media. That's a big problem. Next. But the key to your well-being, I believe, is your happiness. And I can't read this whole thing. Okay. The key to well-being, happiness, and a successful job search is really keeping a positive attitude. And this is what we need to be focusing on. And since I'm the positivity pro, I speak about being positive most of the time because this is what we really need to be focusing on and to get rid of that negativity and those negative beliefs. Next. So I'm going to offer you today a positive attitude toolbox to help you look at some of these negativities and negative beliefs that have been pulling you back and holding you down and maybe causing you to be stressed, depressed, and even causing some illness. So let's see what's in this toolbox. Okay, so the first is reversing negative self-talk. William James, who was the father of modern psychology in the turn of a century, wrote that how we think is how we begin to feel, and that's how we behave. So if we have thoughts in our mind and in our head, we start to feel that way. And if we have negative thoughts, then we start to behave that way. And so this little creature here with his little blanket over his head, he was thinking that he'd rather stay in bed because there's nothing really good out there. So he started to feel unhappy, and then he believed and behaved unhappy and covered himself up with a little blanket and made a really sad little face. And this is what we do. You know, we start to believe what we're thinking, and we start to behave that way. And what we think becomes who we become. So we need to think about, how do we change this negative self-talk? Negative self-talk is insidious, it's unconscious, and it's habitual. And it's something we don't think about. We're not aware of our self-talk, but we need to be aware when it becomes negative. But there is a big problem because we, as a culture, default to negativity. Now, I had a little diagram, a few slides up of some people in a circle with negative faces and positive faces. And I'm not sure that we can go back to that quickly. I wonder if we can. Yeah, let's see. Okay, thank you. Whoops, there it is. Okay, so what percentage of our thoughts do you think on a daily basis, and here I'm giving you the answer if you can see it, are negative? And this is our problem. This is why we default to negativity. What percentage of our thoughts? Can you see that little number in there and that number up there? What percentage? Let me see in your chat. And I also want to see in the chat, can you 70, Julie, yep, 75%. Okay, thank you. Yes, 75% of our daily thoughts are negative. So if we have so much of those thoughts that are negative, then we're constantly fighting this negativity. And this is why we default to negativity. And this is just very common. Most people do this. It's not unusual for us to not be positive naturally. And I want to ask you, did you say anything to yourself negative this morning? Can you think of something that you might have said? You know, sometimes when I get up in the morning, I'll say, oh my God, I got up too late. What's wrong? Why did I sleep so long? What's wrong with me? And that's pretty negative. Instead of saying, wow, it's a new day, had a lot of sleep, that's great. How often do we say, great job, or we're doing really well, and pat ourselves on the back rather than say, oh, we shouldn't have done that. What's wrong? This is what we do all the time. How many thoughts, if we can go back to that other slide now, please, where we were, that would be great. How many thoughts, and while we're doing that, I'm going to ask another question for the chat. How many thoughts do you think? Oh, there we are. Oh, that's it. Great. Thank you. Perfect. How many thoughts do we have in our head on a daily basis? How many thoughts swimming around there? What do you think? What do you think is the number? Let me see in the chat. Anybody have an idea? Julie, you're so good with the 75%. Do you have another thought of how many thoughts run through our heads on a daily basis? Thousands. Yeah, but how many thousands? You're absolutely right. Thousands. See if we can get more specific, because this is an important number to think about. If we're looking at 75% negative, of what percentage of thoughts? Anyone else have an idea? Okay, well, let me tell you how many. 6,000 thoughts run through our minds on a daily basis, according to what researchers have said. 6,000. So of those 6,000, 75% generally are negative. So we've got a good job ahead of us to really focus on being aware of our negative self-talk. And Marcus Antonius, who was really a long time ago, said the universe is change and our life is what our thoughts make it. So he understood this a long time ago, that what we think about is how we become. And this is what we need to be focusing on changing, to be more positive, to be more successful in life, to be happier, to live a longer life and a healthier life. Next. So do you recognize any of these? Any of you recognize any of these? Catastrophizing, shoulda, woulda, coulda, emotionalizing, generalizing. Anyone have any thoughts? Catastrophizing. Anyone want to? Okay, now someone raised their hand. Wow. Okay, what is your question?
No, it wasn't a question. It was
my question. Okay, catastrophizing.
Yeah. When things are not, they just happen to be some way that's not perfect, and then you are exaggerated in your head that it's just the end of the world. You're making it into a catastrophe. And one of the things I really like is there's a book called, I think it's called Living the Catastrophe. And that's very interesting. It's try to make you aware that things are the way they are, and it's not the end of the world. You have tools.
Thank you for that reference. If you wouldn't mind, could you put that in the chat? Yeah, that sounds like a good book for all of us to be reading. Yeah, catastrophizing is like, oh, this is the worst thing that's going to ever happen. This is terrible. It's awful. And things are not really as bad as they are. Sometimes we make them much worse. And then there's the shoulda, woulda, coulda. The shoulda, woulda, coulda. Anyone guilty of Catherine, you know those too, right? Yeah, and then there's the emotionalizing. Oh, it always happens to me. What's wrong with me? I'm so terrible. I'm so old. I can't do this. What's wrong? And then the generalizing. This always happens to me. This is something that never happens to others, but always to me. And all of these are cognitive distortions that really lead to more negative self-talk and negative thinking. Okay, so why don't we look at these? This is reverse some negative self-talk. I'm going to ask you to do a little work now. What I'd like to Oh, Terry, you're paralyzed by the shoulda, woulda, coulda. Okay. Well, now you know that you have to be more aware of your language. And when you hear yourself saying it, maybe to stop yourself and see how you can substitute something else for that. And let's see how we can substitute for some of these. So this is some negative self-talk. It's a problem. I am fearful. I'm anxious. If only. And this one I hear all the time. I'm old. So I'd like you in the chat, some paper, if you have some paper with you, or just to put in the chat, how do we reverse these? I'd like you to spend just the next minute and seeing how each one of these can be reversed. Now that you have a little bit of awareness that this is negative self-talk, how can you make these statements more positive? And William James told us that the greatest discovery of my generation is that a human being can alter his life by alter his attitude. And attitude comes with self-talk and self-language. So, Panina, that's a good question. What you do is you learn a little, you go slowly. It's like learning a new skill, and that's what we need to be doing. You know, there's so much new that's happening. It's happening quite quickly, and I think that's the problem. But is to go slowly at your own pace and to each day try to learn something new and do something different. So how are we doing? Would someone like to come on and say, give me a reverse for it's a problem? We need to use positive affirmations. I'm going to talk about that in a minute. How about it's a problem? How can we change that? Well, the chat seems to be a bit slow. So you know what I'm going to do? I'm just going to go on to the next slide and give you the answers. Okay, so here we are. Janet, thank you. It's a problem. It's an opportunity. Okay, I am fearful. And if anyone has a different answer, a different one that will reverse the problem, reverse the negative self-talk, the negative, and turn it into a positive, please put it in the chat. Here were some of my suggestions. So when you're saying it's a problem, instead of a problem, why don't you say next time it's an opportunity, as Janet's responded here, thank you, and Terry did also, and instead say, also, it's a challenge rather than a problem. It feels so much better. It feels so much lighter. When you say it's a problem, your heart gets heavy. And remember that all of this affects your body and affects your health. So your language is affecting your body and your health. You're not aware of it, but it takes a toll. And ultimately, it takes a big toll. So it's a problem, could be it's an opportunity, it's a challenge. I am fearful, could be I'm confident, or any other positive saying that you want to substitute. The whole idea is to be aware of your language. The next one is I am anxious. Instead of I'm anxious, how about I'm eager? I'm eager to work on this problem. I'm eager to learn technology rather than I'm anxious to learn it. When you say you're anxious, remember William James, when you say you're anxious, then you start to behave that way. You start to behave anxious. So when you use this language, it becomes your behavior. If you say if only, the next would be I will, or maybe next time I'll do it differently. And here's the one that I hear all the time from my clients. I'm old. And we're not old, we're older. We're older every minute. We're older. We become older from the minute we were born. But as soon as you say you're old, you start to feel that you're old and you start to behave that way. So change, if there's anything that you really change from this chart, it's that last one of I'm old to I'm older. Okay, next.
Someone just wrote in the chat, age is just a number.
Yes, that's absolutely right. Thank you. And oh, that's good, Susan. Yeah, no, never say you're old. That's right. Hi, Susan. Okay. And to breathe. Good. Very important. Okay. My other tool is to refute the negative myths. There are so many myths out there that we really believe, but they're just myths. They're not real. But the media puts them out there, which is one of our big problems. And let's look at some of these myths. No jobs for people over 50. Ever hear that one? no jobs. If you get that's what that article in the New York Times was about, that there'll be no jobs for someone over 50. Well, that's not true. People are working into their 60s, 70s, and 80s, and there are jobs. And employers are starting to notice that they really need to keep their older workers. There are jobs, you just need to know where to go and do the right research. Another myth. Next. The next myth, best to find, whoops, let's go back to that one that we just, okay, best to find a job when you're in a job. My clients are always telling me this, but this is what they've heard. But then I go, who'd you hear it from? Well, this is what they've heard. But it's not really true because it's a myth, and myths carry, they circulate around. They're very active, and people start to believe them because they hear them so often. But it's really not true, particularly nowadays. People really don't stay in jobs very long. The younger generation really move around very, very quickly, and they're not worried about finding a job because they're not in a job. They know that they'll find another job. And so this is a myth. It's something that when I guess the older boomers really believe this more than anybody else, is that you need to keep working because no one will hire you if you're not working. Not true, just a myth. Get it out of your head. Don't believe it. That we don't want to believe anymore. Older workers are set in their ways. Well, I think that all of you are here today know that that's not true, that everybody can be set in certain ways, and all of us have certain ways that maybe we do repeatedly, but we also can be flexible. And so get that out of your head. Don't believe any of these. They're very negative. They'll pull you down. They'll have an effect on your brain, on your body, and on your health. Don't believe them. Let's see what is next here. This is my favorite one. And I think that I heard Jeffrey say that someone wrote into the chat. There we are, Janet. Yes. No, Janet, that's not you. Somebody wrote, age is just a number. Yes, age is just a number. Absolutely. That's all that it is. We get caught into this chronological clock thinking. We think in terms of numbers when we think that someone is old. We say, oh, they're 60, they're old. Oh, they're 70. Oh, they're 80, they're old. But the truth is, people function very differently from their chronological age. There could be people in their 30s who could be functioning old, as people in the 80s who are not functioning versus people in their 80s who are not functioning as older people. It's really about how people function, not about the chronological age. So don't get caught up in this chronological clock thinking. We need to stop negative self-stereotyping and internalized biases about our own age and stop thinking that we're old. And one of my pet peeves, and this is one of the objections that I have, that most people, I hope no one on this call will get too upset with me with this, but when people say, and some of you here might be saying this, I'm not old, I'm the new 40. I'm 60, but I'm the new 40. Well, I say, don't be the new 40, be the new 60. Be who you are, because we need to show people that 60, 70, and 80, and I'm going to give you some examples of that, really people function very well. Maybe they're a little slower, things are different in our body, but we still function well. And so we need to stop looking at ourselves as being younger and looking at ourselves as the age that we are and being proud of that age, and stop your chronological clock thinking. Of course, age is really just a number. And another tool, which is a very powerful one, and I saw, Minette, you had put this into the chat. Absolutely, positive affirmations. How many people use positive affirmations now? Let me see in the chat, or just come on and let me know. Come off mute, and there's so few of us, you can do that now. That would be lovely. But let me see it in the chat. How many people use positive affirmations? Good. Okay. Positive affirmations are very, very powerful, but they need to be created the right way to really take effect. They have to be in the present tense. They can't be in the future. It can't be, I will do this. because the future doesn't exist with an affirmation. An affirmation is something you're going to do right now. So it can start with I am, I feel, I can. Right now, present tense. They should be short, 5 words or less, so that you remember them, because you want to be repeating this affirmation over and over again. It's going to be your mantra. And it has to be something that you want to see happen in your life, something that you want to change, something that you want to make better. And that could be your affirmation. What really helps with affirmations if you write them down, and if you write them with a pen and pencil, because they say that a pen or a pencil on paper, not on the computer, because they say that if you use pen and pencil, because you're using your body, you're moving, and it helps to remember better. So write them down as many times as you can, because you want them to be just like your name, your address, your phone number. You want to remember them and you want to repeat them. I like to repeat my affirmations before I go out in the morning, and I like to repeat them as I walk down the steps in my apartment and when I'm going outside, so that I feel and I actually own my affirmation. So I'd like you to try that, to try creating an affirmation that will help you change something that you want to change. Short, 5 words or less, and in the present tense. Otherwise, it doesn't work and it's not as effective.
I heard
Marie.
it also can't have the word not in it.
Oh, never, never, not as a negative. Absolutely. Thank you, Jeffrey. Not a not. No knots. All positive. Something you want to have and want to change. So I'd like to see some positive affirmations in the chat. I'd like to see some of you create one, maybe take a few minutes. And I'd like to see if you can think of a positive affirmation with I am, I feel, I can, or another active verb that will help you to change something, to work on something that you want. Susanna, yes. Okay, I am beautiful. I am confident. Yes. But the other piece about the affirmation that's missing is that it should be specific. So, Julie, when you say I am confident, confident about what? What is it that you want to achieve? You might know it in your mind's eye, but write it in your affirmation. So I am confident to, I am confident I will. Oh, don't say will. I am confident. They're very, very powerful. Okay, Minette, absolutely. I see a studio in my future. Yes, Susan, I do too. Yeah, you put it out to the world. You put your affirmation out and it confirms it to the world. Yes. What would be another powerful one, Susan, is I am in my studio now. See it, visualize it. Affirmations become visualizations of things that we want. And once we visualize things, then we feel that we can have them because they're in our mind's eye already. Great. Okay. Write these down, please, so you don't forget them, and write them often, write them everywhere. I used to tell clients who were forgetting their affirmations to write them down on a 3x5 card and put them on your door or put them on your mirror in the bathroom. So you remember them when you wake up in the morning, you see them. And when you go out during the day, you see them on your door. Put them places where you see them. Very, very important. Okay. So write those affirmations. All right, Catherine. Yeah, good. Oh, good, Panina. Yeah, I'm confident about my communication skills. Good. Hi, Jenny. Good to see you here. Yes, good. But what is your way? Be more specific. What is it that you really want? It should be specific so that you can visualize it. If it's not specific, you can't see it. Okay, next, please. For the fifth tool, which is practicing self-care. And I think most of you know this by now, how important it is to get a good night's sleep, to really eat nutritionally, to really eat good food. But one thing that people don't know so much about is to keep moving. We need to keep moving. Now, we've all been sitting here for over a half hour, and that's a lot of sitting. Sometimes we sit at a computer for 1 hour, 2 hours, 3 hours. Sometimes we sit there for hours and hours, and that's not good for your body, and that's not good for your mind. So I'm going to ask you all to do a little stretch. So I'm going to ask you just to lift your hands up above your head and wave your hands, wave them and shake your hands and wave, and then move your body from side to side. Just move your body, feel your body moving, feel the energy flowing. Really, really important to keep yourself moving, keep yourself energized. When I do a longer presentation, when I work with people in person, I ask them all to stand up and to start moving around the room, because sometimes we start to dance. we do something that gets us motivated and moving. And I have something that's called the 20-20-20 rule, which is every 20 minutes, if you can, put a timer on to get up from the computer, to look across the room, maybe 20 feet or out the window, and then you can sit back down, because you want to exercise your eyes and exercise your body. Very important. And another thing that maybe some of you have seen, this has been written up in the New York Times, which is walking in nature. Now, I know we're in the New York City, most of us. There is nature. There are parks, there's trees. To observe nature, there's the sky and the clouds, which are always so beautiful now this time of year. We've had some beautiful weather. I think today it's raining, but we've had some beautiful things to observe, to walk in nature, even in the city, that we can do this. And it's a Japanese concept that is, again, has been written in the New York Times. Recently, it's gotten a lot of publicity. It's called Shinrin Yoku. And if you can get out into nature once a week, or even a few minutes, go into a park, observe the birds, observe the flowers, the trees, the leaves on the, now we have so many leaves on the sidewalk, and they're so beautiful. Just get out and observe and watch things that are really beautiful. And we can't really be thinking negative thoughts when we're observing beautiful things. So I really suggest that you take some walks in nature and you go into forest bathing. Really a lovely thing. And if you look up Shinrin Yoku and read about it, it'll be very inspiring and very heartwarming. Any questions so far? Anyone have any questions? Any thoughts? Okay, Jeannie, I see that this is part of your positive affirmation. Okay, what you might want to do is visualize yourself at a job. I am, and then say what kind of job it is, so that you can have that visualization. Okay, next. Okay, so here's your challenge. Your challenge is to be essence focused and not ego focused. Ego versus essence is always a big problem for so many of us. Ego is influenced by others, how we look, what others say, how others always can encourage us or discourage us. But if we keep our essence with our pureness, if we know who we are and what's important to us, then we can't let our ego really destroy us or others. And I used to call those others, I call them usually toxic people. They're people who say things, they might be people who love us and people we live with, but they might say things to us like, you're too old to get a job, or it's pretty tough out there. And those are all negative things. So remember that's not your essence. Your essence is that you can get a job. So be focused on your essence, not the ego, and take pride in your aging, because you're aging. You have to take pride in it. This is your life. You can't change aging. We all age. It's a fact of life, and everybody will age. So take pride in it. Don't be discouraged by it, because remember the mantra, age is just a number. And George Burns, he always said it so well, we can't help getting older, but we don't have to get old. It's a beautiful quote. We don't have to get old. Okay, next. So we're going to look for role models who believe age is just a number. These two ladies, Beryl Renwick and Betty Smith, were riding in an elevator in a BBC building in London, and they were telling jokes and they were talking, and a producer heard them. He overheard them talking, and he actually signed them to a radio show. He thought that they were so funny that people needed to listen to them. They were 86 and 90 at the time. And their BBC radio show became one of the most popular shows on the BBC radio. And they won a Sony Radio Academy Gold Award. And they were 86 and 90. So we don't stop. We don't stop. We don't have to stop. And I love this story. And you can look them up if you want to take their names down and just, to just Google them. It's a wonderful story, and to read about them. Here's some more role models. Ida Keeling was 102, and she was still winning world track records. She did die at 106, but she was one of the most active, incredible people way into her 100th year. Grandma Moses, she didn't start painting until she was 78. So these are people who didn't look at age as a number. They looked at age as an opportunity. And Judi Dench, she's 88. All of these people, I'm not going to read their numbers, but you can look at them as you go down and see that they really are very, you know them all, most of them. And I put in Johnny Depp because he's 60. And so if there's some people now who are on this saying, well, I'm 60. Well, Johnny Depp is still going pretty strong at 60, because people at 60, my clients are saying, I'm so old at 60. What can I do? Who's going to want me? Well, Johnny Depp's going pretty strong. And
Oh, look
all
at
these...
the chat.
Oh my God, look at that. Your tap teacher, Catherine, is 94. That's great. Aunt died at 106. Amazing. Yes, people are living longer. They're living healthier, and they're more active into the 80s. My friend Dara Lee, I've put her on there. She's 88. She's extremely active. She's now decided to take up collage and painting and art, and she worked until she was 81. And she decided that was enough, and they didn't want her to leave. They were very upset when she said that she was going to retire at 81. I have a friend, Lorraine, who's 89. She's taking acting classes, dancing classes, and is writing her memoir. So we don't stop. We only stop if we choose to stop. We really can keep going and be active and productive and doing things. And these ladies, please Google them. This is an amazing group of women. In the 1960s, they were a backup band for some very, very well-known male musicians, but they never could get a record cut. They've just come back together again. They're all in their mid-60s, and they finally got their first record, and it's called Feel Good. And it is a feel-good record. So please look them up. Ace of Cups, Feel Good. You'll be dancing to them and dancing to this record. They didn't stop, and they're going strong. Next. So who are your role models? Think about that. Who are they? After this call, I'd like you to think about some of those. Now, who in your life? And I see that Catherine put in her tap dance teacher. That certainly is a role model, 94. Who are your real role models? People that you admire and look up to, that you know are being very active later in life, because they're very inspirational and very motivating. So here's some job search tips. And next, let's see what they are. Be a surfer warrior. I live at the beach in Rockaway, and I watch the surfers, and they are warriors. And I think that we can really relate to them, to being a job seeker or just someone going out there, staying and living their life and doing what they want. Surfer warriors prepare. They prepare their boards, they shine them up, they grease them, they get their outfits ready. They know what they have to do. You have to do the same when you're in job search. You need to prepare. You need to get ready. You need to maybe get a new outfit. You need to maybe get a new hairstyle. You need to do your research. Who's hiring? What's out there? What's happening? Don't go to the places that don't want you. Research the ones that do want you. You need to be learning constantly. Someone put in the chat, what do you do when everything is changing and there's so much new to learn? Well, you need to learn. You can't be negative about it. You can't complain about it because it's what's happening. AI, social media, all of this is happening. And AI is changing the world. It's changing everything. And it's pretty exciting. But you've got to be willing to learn. You've got to be willing to accept. Surfers accept. They accept when they miss their wave. They accept when they fall. But they move on and they keep on and they go look for the next wave. So I think the image of a surfer warrior is very good when we're thinking about job search and moving forward. Next. Manage your job search. Know what you offer. Network, network, network. I said that 3 times because really the best way to get a job is through relationships and through networking. Adapt to the virtual. Just mentioned that. To virtual, all of you are here on virtual now. That's great. So you've all adapted to that. Social media, new social media happening all the time. AI is taking over. We need to know it. We need to understand it. You need to plan. People who plan are more successful. You need to have written plans. Write them down. They can change. That's okay. But make sure you write them down. Set your goals. They can change also, but you need to know what they are and you need to write them down. And most important, which goes along with networking, is to build your relationships, build connections with people. And the very most important is to stay positive, to get rid of that negative, be aware of your negative self-talk. So the ladder of success is to learn new skills. That's the AI, that's the technologies, the social media. There's so much to be learning. This woman, Pat, who was in the New York Times article so many years ago, she didn't learn at all. She did nothing about trying to upgrade her skills. And that's why she was not very successful. You've got to upgrade your skills. You need to adjust your attitude. Can't be negative. You've got to get rid of negativity, get rid of all those negative thoughts, the worries, the cognitive distortions. They'll keep popping up because we can't help it. They're in our DNA, all of us. 75% is negative. That's why we need to constantly be aware of it and constantly refute. We need to develop a powerful pitch. How do you introduce yourself? How do you tell people about yourself? Are you memorable when you're talking? And you need to demonstrate skills with stories. Stories are the best way that people remember you. So how do you have a story that demonstrates your skills, your ability, the things that you do best? And you want to explore and research targets. You want to know which target to go after. You want to have a targeted search, and you can only do that when you do your research and ask questions, and then have a resilient mindset. Always be resilient, because just like the surfer warrior, you're going to fall off the board. You're going to have problems, but resilience will keep you going, will keep you back on that board. So keep that surfer warrior in your mind. And last, Mark Twain said it. He said it all. If you think you can, you can. And if you think you can't, you're right. I love this quote. Yeah. So it's how we think. Remember, how we think is how we behave. And if we think that we can't do it, then we won't be able to do it. So keep that positive mindset, keep moving forward, keep being productive. So if you'd like a copy of my 10 ways to promote yourself, you can email me at rrsnbrg@gmail.com. That's my name without the vowels. So if you would like a copy, or if you'd like just to chat and talk to me about your positive affirmations or your self-talk, I'd be more than happy to give you a 15-minute consultation if you would like. to connect with me. So please take down my email and please connect. So I want to thank you all. I don't know where the rest of this went, but there was much more on there the other day. Okay. But I want to thank you all for being here. Any quick questions? I think we have 3 minutes. Okay. Well, I want to just thank you all for being here. And I hope this really helped. Oh, there comes the rest. Okay. So thank you. And please get in touch if you would like to a 15-minute consult, or if you would like my 10 points on how to stay positive. And stay positive and upbeat. And remember, age is just a number.